here we go. Okay. I am having my second video interview with Canadian composer Joanna Estelle. We're going to talk this time about your 2023 Navona Recordings release, Transmutation. And I love the way you choose titles and also obscure covers, you know, mists and other stuff that makes everybody wonder what's going on. Transmutation. And in the very beginning, I just want to help all of us to understand transmutation. We all kind of know this, but to change or alter in form, appearance, or nature, especially to a higher form. Now, that's a quote, I think, from you or from the dictionary. I don't remember which. Is that
From
you?
the dictionary.
Okay, but it's the especially to a higher form that we underline. That's the whole point of composition and being an artist and all the rest of it. Okay, so that's everybody out there. That's the hint. Transmutation is the name of this Navona album that we're going to talk about. Came out in 2023, as I mentioned.
Mhm.
Now, here's what you say about it. Shortly after beginning to write these pieces, my mother passed away, and I underwent a profound spiritual awakening that lasted several years regarding my personal and cultural history, as
Mhm.
well as their impact on my music.
Mhm.
And Estelle, this is exactly what this album is about. It is, as you know, and as we discussed before we pushed record, this is gorgeous. I mean, this is just absolutely gorgeous, deliberately gorgeous, clearly tonal, uh, utterly approachable and accessible in all the best possible ways. And yet, that word transmutation. You are Ukrainian Canadian. You
Mhm.
have a history we're going to talk about. You have a family. You have the problems that you had trying to find yourself with this very strict, if you will, Ukrainian old culture family. Slap at
Mhm.
me if I'm out of line here.
No,
Um,
no, you're
and
right.
and you've come to grips with all of that, and it took me a little while to understand. But what this is really a Ukrainian album, if you will. The tunes, the full
Mhm.
references. It's just something you put on and just enjoy, as you suggest we should anyway, in your program notes. Um,
Mhm.
and at the same time, it isn't old school Eastern European.
No.
It's Canadian, North American harmonies and all of that. And between the two of them,
Mhm.
it becomes gorgeous, gorgeous, wonderful, satisfying music to
Thank
me.
you.
That's what
Thank
I
you.
want to tell you. Okay,
Mhm.
here's what. So I've set it up a little bit, and here are the pieces just to let everybody out there know a little bit. Faraway Star. You've come
Mhm.
up with these titles. It's tremendous. By the way, the artists are in particular Trio Casals. We'll deal more with Trio Casals. I know at least the pianist pretty well. Not well, but I mean I know her music very well. Appassionata Variations, also Trio Casals. Bobby's Song, Trio Casals, and we'll talk about that because that was on the same program at was that Carnegie Hall, or
Yeah.
yeah, with another friend of mine, Bruce Babcock's piece. I've forgotten
Okay.
the
Okay.
name now, but
Yeah.
Trio Casals played that piece. Fatherland. We
Yeah.
need to talk about that because Fatherland, in these times, is a very powerful word. You know, with everything going on, especially the horrors in Ukraine with Russia and so on. Fatherland and the
Yeah.
meaning of that, or patriotism, or whatever you want to call it. Your meaning is entirely more deep and much more complex and much more sub-basement, but it's what we all kind of, sort of, if we're an immigrant nation in Canada and in the United States, understand and have at some point or level or other experience this conflict, old school, new life, breaking away from old traditions, finding oneself, and so on. All of which you went through. I mean heroically. I just
Ah.
want to tell everybody that this you are. I'm not. I don't want to get too sentimental here, but you are this wonderful example of so many of us in the arts. We are. I don't want to use the word suppressed, but we're kind of we're not taken very seriously. Let's put it that way for a
Yeah.
long, long while. And then finally, we ourselves, our own consciousness and presence says,
Mhm.
yeah, no, well, forget all that. I'm not an accountant. I'm a composer. So
Yeah.
that's your story. Let me finish my yak here for just a minute. But Bobby's song, I want to talk to you about that. Fatherland, I mentioned. I Am My Home.
Mhm.
What a title. And oh God, I'm going to mess it up, but Ovidiu Marinescu, the cello soloist, who is also a member of the trio, is there. And of course, all of these are narratives. Every single one of these pieces is a narrative piece. And then there are all these this one beautiful thing of whatever movements I've forgotten now, 7 movements maybe, songs from heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it 7?
Songs from the heavens,
From the
and
heaven.
there are 11 pieces. It's a song cycle.
Got it. Okay, thanks. And I see them all here. But the point is, you really go home on this one.
Yeah,
You're,
it was a profound experience to write.
yeah. Well, that's where we are, everybody. And now let's go back and make sure we remember, because I always do this after the fact. Hang on, who Joanna Estelle is, okay? Uh, Joanna Estelle Storashuk, I guess that's your family, a
Yeah,
Ukrainian name, Ukrainian-Canadian composer, lyricist,
yeah,
and arranger. And I'm pushing that one because this is a songbook. I mean, for lack of, it almost sounds too silly. It's not, doesn't give proper credit, but this is one beautiful, beautiful album that is so close to the old ways, if you get my drift, about tunes and
yeah,
folkishness and all that, and yet is exactly what you intend, something that has transmuted, if you will, in your own
yeah,
way. Okay.
yeah,
Anyway, let's see. We'll get you did this whole thing where and it's part of the of Fatherland, where I think, again, stop me if I miss the point here, but I remember that, and it's the point of Fatherland that we'll discuss. It's that you had all of these wonderful longings to be a composer and so on, and practicality said, hey, wait a minute, get a job, work for the government so you get a good, and so on. But you did finally, you did learn some classical piano and theory at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto as a young person, and then you finally sort of did this thing over many, many years. It's incredible what you've done. It's like after work, what do I do? Oh, I think I'll get a bachelor's degree in music because I love music and I'm a composer. That's what
yeah.
it was, a bachelor's degree in English and psychology. Whoops. Well, that must help help you as a composer incredibly. But the point is, you are one of those that goes and goes and goes. Once you make up your mind, I have a funny feeling, and you made up your mind that you were going to be a composer, and that's all there is to it. Okay, now let me read from your program notes. I chose Transmutation as the name of my second album, as most of the music was either inspired by or is the expression of my emotional response to difficult, sometimes tragic circumstances. Wow. And by the way, all families, you know what I
Oh,
mean? We
absolutely,
all have these horrors. It's part of
absolutely,
just living a long life. But you
absolutely.
mentioned sometimes tragic circumstances, which we'll talk about in my own life, or the life of a family member. Over time, often with deep reflection, that's why you come up with some of these titles.
Yeah,
um, I was able to transmute painful memories and experiences into music, which I hope will touch and perhaps heal the soul of the listener. I could go on, but we don't need to go any further. That's exactly the point of this album. I put it on this morning. I had a million other things, on my head. I wish I could retire. I mean, really retire and just read all the books I need to read. But it just took me to another wonderful world. I wasn't expecting it at all. And that world is a world of devout expectation,
mm-hmm,
of confidence in melody, if you will,
mm-hmm.
in your own use of folkloric influences. I presume these are your own tunes, but influence or not? I was going to ask you that question.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh, of course, of
gotcha.
course.
But they are so folkloric
Oh yeah, oh
that
yeah.
one wonders. So you are thoroughly Ukrainian.
Oh, whether I want to be or not,
There you go.
it's what it is.
It's kind of like me. I got the Swedes and I got the Germans, and I eat sauerkraut and I can't help it. Okay,
We are what we are.
exactly right. And it goes a long way back in the genetics and all the rest
Yeah,
of it. It's so profound about we are what we are.
yeah,
It's a huge structure on top of
yeah.
which we stand in the present moment. Those of us who are standing in the
Absolutely,
present moment.
absolutely.
Now, Trio Casals, since their debut in 1996 at the Casals Festival. These guys are fabulous. Let's see, I haven't met them, but I've recorded some. I've reviewed some of their material, especially Kizlitsina, Anna Kizlitsina, the pianist, Alexander Kizlitsin, her husband,
Her
and
brother.
cellist Ovidiu
It's
Marinescu.
her brother. Dan,
Yeah.
Alex Kazlitzin is her brother.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also that bit about Kizlitsina and Kizlitsin, it's taken me
Yeah.
watching the horrors going on in Ukraine to figure out how all that works. Males and female,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I thought maybe they were husband and wife.
No.
Okay. And then cellist Ovidiu Marinescu. I hope I'm close to pronouncing it properly.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And they've put out lots of really lots of CDs for Parma recordings and Navona and so on, and just they're first class. So hurrah and congratulations for getting on that particular bandwagon. Irashko Singers, please tell me about them because it's much more than I thought originally. I think somehow or other I knew about them from the earlier CD or something. I'm not sure they were on that CD, but the point is these guys are. How long have you known this choir? And it's clearly very Ukrainian. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. Lawrence Iwashko, who founded this group, is one of my oldest and dearest friends, who also happens to be Ukrainian. He's like my brother, my spirit brother. And when I was looking for a choir to record these 11 pieces, which were written in Ukrainian, there were no Ukrainian choirs within several hours of Ottawa. So I talked to Lawrence about it, and he said, well, no one in my choir speaks Ukrainian. Think of this.
Interesting.
But he said, I'm willing to work with them if you're willing to.
Is that because they were Russian speakers? They are Russian speakers as opposed to Ukrainian, or just the English speakers? Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, French, Germans.
Yeah.
Non-Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And we had to think about it a while. Lawrence and I spent almost 2 years working with these guys to get their transliterated. I spent 7 months doing a transliteration of the Cyrillic text into Roman letters.
Oof.
7 months, okay? So, and then he spent about, almost 2 years working with them. I would go to the rehearsals. We were extremely hard on them in terms of the pronunciation. I can remember being at a rehearsal and they're singing something and I'm sitting there screaming, "There's no such sound in Ukrainian." I turned into a ranting lunatic.
I was going to say they must have learned to hate you.
Well, they loved
for a while anyway.
No, but I mean, and Lawrence would go, "She's right." I was there as a listener because I said to them, "Look, this is an international release. You don't know who is going to hear this music. A Ukrainian soldier in Ukraine could hear this.
Sure.
A lady who lost her child to the war. Some immigrant who's here worrying about what's going on in their homeland." I said, "You cannot afford to be anything less than perfect in your diction." I said, "We cannot do this." And it really paid off. They got it. I had several talks with them about the importance of authenticity. If it was French, it would have been the same thing. We live in an English-French area here. If it had been a French text, would have been the same thing. You can't do it with an English accent. It has to be in the authentic style as close as possible to where the text comes from. Lawrence and I worked really hard on this, and I have to tell you, we did first live performance of these pieces in April last year to a full house in Ottawa, full of Ukrainians, and nobody knew that those people didn't speak Ukrainian.
Okay, and it reminds me just generally about opera, about any art form. It has to be exactly perfect. That's all, let alone if it's being recorded. So, let me just finish this thought, which is that you came down hard, as you said, and it was not only necessary, but I'll bet they grew enormously from that experience of needing, and we're talking amateur choirs. Let's be clear, most all choirs are
Yeah,
amateur with a
yeah,
few fillers, and I'm assuming that Iwashko is more or less an amateur choir.
pretty
Um,
much.
okay, and with an excellent conductor, clearly, but
Yeah.
that one detail is like sink or swim.
Oh, I
You,
yes,
you know,
absolutely. There
amazing.
was no room. There was no room for anglicization. It had to be sounding Ukrainian. And in fact, I had to record one piece twice because the soloist anglicized the first phrase and the last phrase. And I said, I'm terribly sorry, but you can't do that. So, we were very, and, I have to tell you that in the end, they all loved singing these pieces. They sang them so much, they made them their own music. They were so excited when they performed them live. It was so gratifying, having been such a pain in the neck, you know, for so long.
That is why, since I was a kid, the whole idea of our teachers, the youth symphony teacher or the conductor that I studied with, and so on and so forth, all that harping, if you will,
Yeah.
uh, I am grateful for every single word of criticism and correction now because and I realized shortly after those events, but I'm sure they realize, especially with the album now, hmm, we're
Well,
there,
this album, I don't know whether I believe I told you this, but in December, this album was awarded by the Global Music
You mentioned.
Competition. It was awarded Best in Show, which was of all the CDs that were sent in, and I received two gold medals for this award for this CD, and it was for composition and contemporary classical. And what I told the choir, because a lot of that has to do with these 11 pieces, they were done so well for an amateur choir. And I said to them, you know what? All of you share in this honor. Yes, I wrote the music, but I said you performed the music, you worked really hard. I said the honor goes to all of you, and especially to Lawrence, because he really, it was a labor of love for about 18 months. It really was, and they were all so satisfied with being part of a project like this. It meant a lot to me to see them really grow into this music.
Yeah,
It meant a
absolutely.
lot to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I've mentioned ad nauseum, they will never be the same.
No,
They just had a professional, really professional experience where it was like no nonsense. We're recording. This thing's going to go out all over the world.
oh yeah.
Let's get it together. The
And,
pronunciation has to be perfect, et cetera, et cetera. All that. And they may have complained and threw darts at your image for some months, but
but you know what? The recording engineer is a fellow named Elias Dubelston. And Elias, who happens to understand Cyrillic, and is part of the sort of Eastern European, Byzantine Christian world that I'm from,
yeah.
he was relentless. I mean, I was a pain in the neck. He was a pain in the you know what. He made them sing these things. I felt so bad. At one point, I just said to him, I was in the recording room with him and I said, I can't listen anymore. I went into a corner and I hid. And I said, I can't listen.
I
He made,
cannot believe I'm gonna jump right in here. I
yeah.
can't believe how invigorated you are. There's something just you even look younger than the last time I saw you in 2018 or whatever it was. There's just something really vigorous and confident. And by the way, in my notes, while I'm trying to kind of get us back on subject a little bit, but the idea is in my notes over and over again, I say to myself, and these are stream of consciousness. I'm listening to the pieces, and I just type whatever's there and look back later and try and put a review together. But it's the confidence. This is an album of very simple music, really. There's nothing virtuosic particularly. It's just
No,
gorgeous, gorgeous. If I may use the word folkloric music
sure.
without offending you, the tunes are just gorgeous. and very much of your culture and from your
Yeah.
culture, your Ukrainian culture. So there's nothing, about about that virtuosity or anything, and I'm glad to hear it because the album is so accessible to the public and to the people and to the performers, clearly.
Well, I do ask myself, and I ask other composers this question, and some of them don't like it. And the question is, who are you writing for? Who are you writing for? If people cannot relate, like if the listener can't relate emotionally to the music, if the performers don't have some sort of an experience of some sort of a personal reaction that it uplifts them or it inspires them, what is the point? To me, what I call technical or academic music isn't my bag. There are lots of folks who do it and do it really well. But I studied for many years with a lady who just passed away recently, Alice Parker. Alice Parker was my teacher, and her whole thing was the melody is the point. And I was of the same philosophy. I still am of the same philosophy. I have pretty good arranging skills. Like I can do a
Yes.
pretty nice job with something that's
Wonderful choral
on.
arrangements,
Yeah,
fabulous
I mean,
choral arrangements. The
I
trio,
do.
the way you use the trio is fabulous in terms of
Yeah,
orchestration and what you know what you're doing for sure.
yeah,
Excuse
with
me,
the
go ahead.
London Symphony. I mean, I do okay in terms of the actual arrangements. But the point is that for me, and I explained this, I wrote a paper about Alice Parker actually a couple of months before she passed away. And, if I can't remember a melody that I heard, if it's just, the soundscape is the big thing, I don't do soundscapes. Because for me, song, you mentioned song form. Song form is my thing because songs were the first things that people sang or played. And the voice was the first instrument. And what does the voice do? It sings. So, with Alice's kind of influence, she helped me to be more true to myself. You're talking about authenticity. She gave me the confidence to pursue what I believe, and I believe very strongly in songs. They are representative of different cultures. Yes, in my case, it's the Ukrainian culture. In other people's, it's whatever culture their people are from. But these are the ways where there's history. History is shared through generations through song. There's nothing new about this. I'm going back to an old thing that used to be very popular. But I mean, there are composers like Schubert who did song form, but in the modern era, song form has been kind of ignored, and I kind of picked it up because of my background. My background influenced me. I could have written Songs from the Heavens as one big work, but I chose not to. I chose to break it down by texts that I extracted from the Ukrainian Catholic. I'm actually a Byzantine Catholic, not that it matters in terms of the
Complicated.
content. No,
It's a little bit complicated.
yeah, it's just another label.
Yeah,
But it's
it really.
effectively Byzantine Christianity is what we're talking about.
Okay.
And I
And that
went
makes sense, of course, from the
yeah,
Byzantine Empire, and it was a Christian empire after Constantine and so on. Yeah.
okay. So all I did was I took my prayer book from my church and I extracted 11 texts that I thought would translate nicely into songs for concert performance. And in fact, one person from my church last week said, well, they were nice, but in liturgy, we don't use harmony and stuff. And I says, yes, but the point is that it wasn't written for liturgy. It was written for concert.
Yeah, and for the 21st
So,
century.
so there are
The whole point.
reactions of purists, which
Yeah.
is fine.
Sure.
But I wrote this for the general public to share with them the sounds that have been in my head since I was a wee girl. That's what I was doing. And the death of my mother, caring for my mother, the grief of
Now, you had a difficult relationship with her, mind you, and you did care for her in her last
yeah,
months.
I cared for her for 12 years.
Talk about it now, because that is fatherland, is it not? This piece that's on the album, in a way, it's her all those
Yeah,
conflicts.
fatherland is an interesting thing because there was a long period of estrangement by my family. I mean, they didn't speak to me for 12 years because they didn't like me. Now, it's a little tough pill to swallow. But after my sister passed away, my mother kind of rediscovered her other daughter and called me and said, you know, I need you and this and this. And I went, okay. Um, and over, you know, over the time that I looked after her originally from a distance, and then I moved in with her in St. Catharines in 2009. And I, you know, lived with her for several years, 24/7. I looked after her. I went every day to the nursing home once she was in a nursing home. What it did was it healed the opportunity to get to know my background and my family on a different level without all of the interference of my sister and my father. So actually, Fatherland was an interesting piece because it changed titles several times, because what I was trying to talk about was about the relationship I had had, the difficult relationship I had as a person born in the new world to old world parents. Okay, that's a tough one. And for me, it was especially tough because they took it as an insult. They took it as an affront to their
As
authority.
they would, fearful of losing their culture. Our daughter
Yes,
is leaving us to become a Canadian. We're going to lose
yes,
all that stuff.
exactly. And
As
it
Native
was,
Americans did, this worried the same. You know, we all the old
yeah, old
country people worry about that justifiably. Yeah.
assimilation, you know, but I mean, yes, so it kind of documents the stages that I went through with my family. Thank goodness, in the end, because I was able to spend time with my mother at the end of her life, we were able to. She came to understand me. She used to say many times, "I'm sorry that I didn't know you." You know, they assumed things. They said things that were untrue, and I just didn't fight because there was no point.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point of all of this is through that piece, I kind of documented this difficult relationship, and in the end, she said to me, "You're my angel," and I said, "Well, thank you for saying that." So you see, perseverance. You know, this is what the CD is. A lot of it is about persevering through difficult situations. And then I came out at the other end, and I was able to sit for long periods of time once my mother had passed. Sit for long periods of time with, you know, by myself with my cat, and just meditate and reflect on a lot of the stuff. And this music came out of that. It was an interesting organic. I didn't set out to do this. It just evolved. It was an evolution of me working through all of the things in my life. And it's really funny because I've started working on my next CD, and it's going to be called Evolution.
Evolution with an A,
Evolution.
which means
Evolution.
what? I forgot.
Evolve.
Not
Evolution.
evolution with an E.
Yeah.
Oh, with an E. I thought you said evolution. I was
No.
wondering what that.
No. So the
Good
next CD.
grief.
Well, the next CD, I've already started recording. I did one recording with Ovidiu Marinescu a couple of weeks ago with piano and cello.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm documenting my life. Is effectively what I'm doing. I'm documenting my journey through this world musically because it's an interesting journey, you know, and I'm just built this way that I express and I process experiences through sound.
Exactly
And,
right. Yeah.
you know, and then I share it, you know, if anybody's interested, you know, and if people don't relate, that's okay, because there are lots of
Exactly right.
people who do.
Yeah. Exactly right. Well, just look again. Fatherland is composed for Trio Casals. Here's a quote. Fatherland is an autobiographical account of my challenging relationship with my strict Ukrainian immigrant parents, as you mentioned. It's in 4 sections, which is kind of interesting. In other words, you are such a narrative composer. Everything is narration. Everything has a narrative, and I think that's exactly right. In fact, people who say there is no narrative are lying.
Yeah,
Composers
there
who
is
say
a narrative.
there's narrative. There has to be narrative to everything to get from A to B to C to D. All that. Anyway, it's a wonderful piece. I'm glad we had a moment to talk about it. And but there are other things. We're kind of skipping around a bit, but I think that's okay. let's look. Well, while we're with let's look at Bobby's song. I want to know that. I know the story, but I want to know it because of the way, not the story necessarily, but the way you process through your art these kind of events. Tell us about Bobby's song.
Well, I'll give
This
you
also
the
is Trio Casals, excuse me. So,
yeah. Trio Casals actually performed it at Carnegie Hall in May of 2023, and remind me to tell you about the concert. Anyway, Bobby's song is a song that I wrote about my mother's 9-year-old brother who was abducted and murdered in 1937 in Edmonton, Canada, by enemies of Ukraine. My grandfather was a fighter of the resistance 100 years ago. 100 years ago, he was fighting Bolsheviks in the street. Okay? This is nothing new that we see here. But anyway, he fought, he was a fighter pilot. He had to flee in the middle of the night to Canada because the Bolsheviks were looking for him. He left my grandmother. He didn't tell her where he was going because he said, if they arrest you, you won't know anything. And he got to Canada and he stayed here, I think, 3 years and worked at crummy jobs, making bricks and stuff like that until he had enough money to go back to Ukraine to get my grandmother, my mother, my aunt, and Bobby, who was a baby at the time. Brought them back to Canada in 1927. They moved out to Edmonton. My grandfather's family had always been Ukrainian nationalists and not Nazis or fascists like some people want to say. We just want to be left alone to be who we are. My grandfather's father had spent 10 years in Siberia as a guest of the Tsar. So, we knew about this stuff. Anyway, so he was working in Canada to try to bring about independence in Ukraine. He was threatened many times by people here in Canada saying, you better stop what you're doing because you're going to pay. And he kind of went, yeah, right. Well, eventually in 1937, he was speaking at some sort of a rally. And what they did was they enticed my mother's little brother. And we have theories about who actually did this, but it doesn't matter. The point is that they abducted him, and he was found a day later in a dead train yard. He had been murdered, and he had been put under a dead train and cut into two pieces. And he had been put with the Ukrainian flag in his 9-year-old hands. Needless to say, my grandmother found him and her hair turned white. My mother was his soulmate and she never recovered. She was terrified her whole life. And I was telling someone this story a couple of years ago about my poor mom, and I used to talk to her a lot. I wanted to try to help her overcome this when I was looking after her. And this person said to me, it was like always carrying a weight. Our whole family was very it was hard to carry this trauma. I'll put it that way. Every holiday my grandparents would cry. It was really hard. It was hard growing up in this environment. Anyway, so this person said, have you ever thought of writing music about Bobby? And I kind of went, I don't know. And a couple of weeks later, I started hearing this music. And I told this person, I said, you know what? I'm going to write this piece. And what I decided to do was I decided to write it as a love song from Bobby to my mother, because my mother used to go every day to the train yard and cry because she missed him so much. And I wanted it to be something beautiful instead of something horrific. And I wrote Bobby's song. And I sent it to Trio Casals was looking for some music, and I sent it to them, and they loved it so much that they decided to record it not only for me, but for their own CD, and they played it at Carnegie Hall in May. Now, the fabulous thing, apart from having this performance at Carnegie, it was the second one they did of my music. The cousins of Bobby's who are still alive, I invited them all to come to New York, and there were 5 of us. 5 cousins of Bobby were there. We're all in our 60s and 70s. And the trio was so excited to meet Bobby's family. And they were so touched. I brought a picture. I have a picture of him.
Sure, show me.
I always, this is Bobby.
Put it, angle it just a little bit more
What?
strictly vertical, I guess is the. Oh, look at him! Wow, he was so young. That
Yeah,
shot, he's quite young.
that was a baby picture. That was the only picture that my grandmother kept of his because she was so distraught. Anyway, I took the picture of Bobby with me to New York so that the trio could see this is a real
Nice.
person. This is a real person. This is not an imaginary thing, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And it was so wonderful. They were so touched. It was a fabulous rejuvenation of myself. You know, I really felt that I had given him his due and that my people had been given their due. And this piece has been extremely well received, sadly to say, because of what's going on in Ukraine right now. I mean, it's a sad, sad thing that we're seeing a repeat of this horrible thing. But anyway, yes, I did a version of this for string orchestra for the L'Orchestre Classique de Montréal, and they had a performance in October in Montreal. And I wrote a version for string orchestra, and the place was packed, and people were crying because of this.
It's gorgeous.
And yeah, and
the whole album is gorgeous.
you know, but your point and what I said, because they asked me to talk about the piece, the point is that I said, you know what, this is the story of my family, but I don't know how many other stories are out there. I don't know how many of you have something in your family that was tragic. So I said, I'm not making like I'm the only one, but I said, I hope you can relate to the feeling of love that I'm trying to. I didn't want it to be grief. I wanted it to be love.
Well, you mentioned he was a happy child anyway.
Yeah, he was a happy.
Notes. Yeah.
He was a happy little boy. My mother said he used to sing all the time, you know.
So it was particularly malicious.
It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
By the way, we had a case here in Santa Barbara maybe 10 years ago, somewhat similar, a drug situation, and the kid who was murdered was the little brother of the guy who owed some money, you know, so they kidnapped the younger brother who didn't have a clue what was going on and murdered him. It's the cold-bloodedness of it all. Even in politics, in this case we're talking about, in your case, we're talking about a political situation.
Yeah, it was a political killing. You know, so it's been very therapeutic for me and for anybody who takes the time to listen to this music and to consider and to reflect. I do this work not for money. I do it for healing. I do it for uplifting. I do it for love, actually.
And there is legacy involved.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be clear. You want to leave a legacy, and that's very, very important.
Yeah.
You know, I remember very well your first album, Emergence. I didn't get a chance to hear it today. I just didn't have the time. But I want to read back to you what I wrote at the time of Emergence, okay? Quote, Canadian composer, lyricist, and arranger, now I understand, Joanna Estelle has arrived at an artistic Rubicon with the 2018 Navona Records release of her first CD, Emergence, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
The title is not cursory, for it distills in one word, quote, the process of coming into being,
yeah.
Quote. That has been Estelle's personal and artistic journey of the past several years, I said then, in 2018.
Yeah.
And this, your new album, is what I'm trying to get across to people is you don't have to become more complex to be more meaningful, if you will. And as I said to you, and maybe earlier, but certainly off camera, this album is you. I just feel so comfortable and so embraced and caressed by this album, and I think you have really found a way, and that's your way, which is this tremendous Ukrainian heritage that you have expressed in a contemporary, not to say contemporary, out of, but very, very accessible 21st century manner of composition and so on. So, the album's fabulous. Let's see, what else? I was wandering a bit, but I did want to read that one to you because I looked it up and I thought, oh, I'm good.
Okay. No, yes. No, it's
Um,
true.
let's see. As I said earlier, there's something extremely confident about your second CD. There's a real confidence in where you're coming from these days, I think. Anyway, and I hardly know you. I'm just one CD away from what I knew of you in 2018. Tell us about your compositional journey since 2018. I mean, do you have any sense that's something, something kind of you went, now I know, something like that?
Well, I think that there are two or three factors I think that have increased my self-confidence since then. One is that first CD was very well received, which I didn't know. Second thing was Alice Parker, as I mentioned before. Alice really, my goodness, she was like my cheerleader. I will never forget her. She gave me a lot of confidence and, really, really affirmed the kind of music that I write. It's not what everyone does. I write song form, and it can be instrumental song, it can be choral song, it can be art song. But effectively, my specialty is song form. I've written orchestral song. And I think that having performances at Carnegie Hall, I mean, that's no small thing. I had one in February 2020. Trio Casals played Faraway Star, which was the first piece that's on this CD. And then once again, I thought, well, lucky me, I lucked out. And when they said they wanted to do another piece, I was going, wow, this is not, just luck. This is good. And when they told me that they wanted to
They didn't
perform,
need to get back to you, in other words.
no, like the first time I thought it was luck. The second time I kind of went, well, this is interesting because they obviously think and see something of value in what I'm doing. And I think that has had a humongous impact on my confidence that these first class, and they're first class musicians, they're international traveling musicians. If they feel that my music is worth presenting on a stage like that, I think I need to pay attention. I need to give myself points because I'm not the first person to give myself points. I'm always very kind of, well, it was, okay. And in fact, there's going to be another performance of a piece at Carnegie sometime later this year with Ovidiu and Noreen Polara. It's a piece that I wrote as a wedding present for Ovidiu that was just recorded in December. So that'll be my third Carnegie. And, I don't talk a lot about myself because I don't want people to think that I'm bragging. And people, the minute I mention Carnegie Hall, everybody kind of shuts up and goes away. You know what I mean? So I'm very
I do. They're
careful.
all jealous. Let's face
Well,
it.
yeah, okay.
In a
You know, but
way, I mean, you know what I mean? People can easily be intimidated.
yes.
Believe me, I know all about that. We don't
Yeah,
mean to, but somehow we
no.
intimidate people.
But I mean, what I'm trying to say is my game is not to make people envious. I'm not up to that. That's not my thing. My thing is to write the music that is from my deepest self, that I feel is beautiful, that comforts or uplifts or inspires me, and then I try to do the best arrangements that I can do for the people that I'm writing for, the most lyrical. I don't need to be John Cage. I don't need to be all of these people. I'm Joanna Estelle. That's what I do. And I've now come to the point where I can say that. 5 years ago, I couldn't say that with confidence.
It's
But
amazing
because,
what I'm hearing from you. It's amazing, and the contrast between that first CD and our conversation then. I haven't looked at it, but what I see now is so much more confidence, self-confidence, and so it's
well, it's
fabulous.
it's it's because of the fact that some very some people that I truly respect who, don't have to bother with little old Joanna Estelle, choose my music. They choose to program it. And that means a humongous amount to any composer. When people that you respect choose your music, you've got to start saying, I must be doing something right. My job is to keep on doing it. And that's what my plan is. I don't know what my next project is right now, but I know that whatever comes to me, I will do my absolute best. That's all I can do.
And also, wait until it comes.
Yeah, I just wait.
Yeah, just wait until it comes. As you know very well, it comes when it happens, and all that good stuff.
yeah, I don't
Well,
look for stuff.
now we haven't even discussed the songs from heaven,
Mm.
1 through 11. Uh, and I guess I took your advice. You said my new song cycle, songs from the heavens, excuse me, is based on texts from the Ukrainian Byzantine Catholic St. John Chrysostom liturgy. I didn't
Yeah,
realize it was Catholic. I recognized the other thing like Chrysostom and stuff, but I didn't realize it was a sort of Byzantine Catholic, and it makes perfect sense because Byzantium was a Christian state from from the Emperor Constantine. Um, so I took your advice. Somewhere in here, you say, "Yeah, kick back and just listen to the whole thing and let it flow over you." So I thought to myself, I'm not going to nitpick these piece by piece. That's ridiculous. So I did exactly what you said, and so I'm now going to give you just a kind of an overview of my impressions. I didn't quite do what you said because I wanted to keep them separate so that I could make my own notes because later I have to write the review. But I think just in an overview, this is such clear, clean writing. I want to pass that to you very, very confidently.
thank
It's
you.
a lovely understanding of choral balance, voice balancing, counterpoint, intervoicing, inner voicings, and so on. I mean, you know the craft. You are really good at the craft. And again, these are so Ukrainian and folk tunish, if you will. That sounds kind of deprecating, if that's the right word. But the point is, as you have said and we've talked, these are in the most beautiful tonal, if you will,
Mhm.
20th, 21st century kind of harmonies. These are perfect for college choirs, for high
Thank
school
you.
choirs. I don't think they're terribly difficult from what I heard. In other words, they should be very approachable for lots and lots of choirs to put together and perform in various combinations. What do you think?
They should be, because I was very aware that I was dealing with a non-professional choir. Um, the only thing that requires the most work is the transliteration of
Sure.
the Ukrainian. Okay, because I don't want it to be done poorly. But knowing that the people that were singing it didn't speak that language, I was extremely careful not to overburden them with text. I did a lot of oh and ah, you know what I mean?
Ah,
Where
nice. Very
I
intelligent.
did it on purpose.
Yeah, very
And
intelligent.
there's one thing, the creed, which is the longest piece, it's 5 minutes. We was the only Ukrainian speaking person on the CD, because the text was extremely wordy. But in the background, I had the choir singing textual segments, like little phrases. You know what I mean? So they could sing the same thing again and again, and it wouldn't be so hard for them to learn. So I was very careful in how I set the melody versus the accompanying parts. I
So
did
if
I
I
did it on
understand you
purpose.
correctly, and I'm being a little bit facetious, but I think you tells me that as a composer, you know very well where you want to have these performed, which is everywhere. And the biggest problem is the language.
Yeah,
So you have, if I understand what you just said to me, you've made sure that other difficulties are assuaged. I think that's the right word. Um, and so you have these gorgeous pieces for choirs of several levels,
yeah,
college, high school, I would
yeah.
think, and community choirs capable of performing any one of the 11 or a suite. Okay, are you
Yeah.
okay with that? That they be mixed up a
Sure.
bit, or
They can do whatever they want.
exactly? That's what I was thinking, as
Yeah,
well. And so they're very accessible and
yeah.
tuneful. I hate to use that word because it's so denigrated, but they're so beautiful. And so you made sure that these were not. You knew that the choirs would have a hard enough time with them. texts.
Yeah, I felt the
So
text
yeah,
was going to
it's a
be, yeah.
perfect response. It's a perfect compositional craft.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, I was at church this morning, and people who are not of the Byzantine group don't realize that Byzantine churches around the world, Ukrainian ones I'll use, um, we have a version of the liturgy which everybody knows. You learn growing up. It's just melodies. They're not complicated. I could go to Paris, and when I go to Paris, I go to church there. Um, they're the same melodies I sang this morning here. So that it's not that it has to be so complicated. It's the meaning. It's the meaning of what we're saying. It's the comfort of having something familiar. You know what I mean? I went back to the Ukrainian church in my 50s. I didn't go to Ukrainian church for years. But when I looked after my mother, I started taking her and I went back. And it's the comfort of hearing the sounds that I grew up with. It doesn't matter to me. You can be a Presbyterian, an Anglican. It doesn't matter. It's the fact, it's the comfort. It's not the complexity of the sound. It's the comfort of the sound.
Oh, damn, that was good. It's not the comfort, it's not the complexity of the sound, it's the comfort of the sound.
Comfort.
And by the
Yeah,
way, that can speak to everything. If you're going to
yeah,
be successful as a composer, you want
yeah.
comfort. You want to comfort an audience. You don't, at
Why do
least
we?
at some point, even if the music is quite esoteric, at some point there's comfort.
There
There's,
should be.
if
Why
you're,
do we
there should
make?
be.
Why do humans make music? Like we have to go back to these kinds of questions that a lot of people don't think about. They think, oh, I can write 12 tone, and all these microtones. Well, you know what? God bless them. But it
You
doesn't turn,
think
well, no, God bless them. Like there's room in the bus
there's
for
plenty of,
everybody.
I review everything in sight,
Yeah,
and I
everything.
love
But
all of it. So
yeah, it's all fine.
yep.
But we're talking about me, and my game is to offer solace through music because you know what? The world sucks big time right now. And what do we have? I don't want to do drugs. I don't want to drink. Where can a human go to find comfort and peace? Well, my drug of choice is music. And
Brava.
you know what I'm saying? That's where I go. What I write is what I create when I come into my little studio here with my cat,
Very
and I
important.
sit. Yeah, yeah, this is what I'm doing. Is
I
this
mean the cat.
Yeah, well, she's my hardest critic.
No, no, it's very, very clear, and I'm going to wind this down now to keep us
Okay.
within an hour. But I want to kind of do an overview. We I think we've kind of sort of touched on just about everything. There
Yeah.
are important pieces that Trio Casals plays in the beginning. They're present throughout, and then there's this whole section that is this wonderful songs from the heavens
Hmm.
in several sections. That's so Ukrainian, Canadian, contemporary, something, whatever, but it's gorgeous, every bit of it, in
Hmm.
the tradition of your heritage and what we've been talking about all night.
Hmm.
Likewise, the other pieces, and there's lots of narrative. I love that, where you assign instruments a character. You mentioned that, and
I like doing
it's
that.
done it's just done anyway. It's a matter of how the human thing works about exchanges and so on.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
Even though the songs from the heavens are written in a traditional Byzantine liturgical style for the most part, my background includes jazz piano. Okay,
Oh, I
and
forgot about that part. Your sordid part of your life.
you know what? There are chords in these pieces that are like sevenths and elevenths and
I
ninths,
wondered.
and you know what I mean. So that's one thing that's different. The second thing is syncopation. I like having the syncopation between different parts, and
Uh-huh.
there's ostinatos. Like this is not in Byzantine music. So
No,
what
not
I've
at all.
done is I brought there's one piece there that goes from it's number 4. It's with the male singer.
Oh
The
yeah,
soul.
yeah, yep, yep.
Uh,
I'll get
it's
down to it.
holy, 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 holy.
Uh-huh.
That one.
Yep.
That goes. It starts in the 900s with the monadic, the monks. where they would just have a like a low
That
note.
explains it. I see. I understand you now. Yeah,
That
I
piece
understand that.
in 3 pages, it goes through 1,500 years of Ukrainian music.
Ah, I hadn't heard it that way today, listening
Yeah,
to it
yeah.
just a couple
So
of times, but
so it
very,
starts
very
off
interesting.
like a drone of the bass,
Very
and then
interesting.
the next evolution was the bass and the tenor drone with the same thing. And then I go into, say, the 1920s, and then I go into modern, when all of the voices sing together. I've got sevenths and ninths and elevenths and all kinds of cool things going on there. And then I pull it right back in the end to the beginning of the monadic chant. It was so fun to write this.
I'm looking at it right now, and I see it in caps with me. Starts in low voices with soloists over that
Exactly.
drone. Again, nice writing
Yeah.
for a cappella part and so on. But the point is, I didn't really notice in this piece. You know, give me a break when listening to it. But some of the things you've mentioned. Um, but I did notice in general that every once in a while, some little thing would happen, some little harmonic thing, not just in that piece, but throughout
Yeah.
these 11. Some little something would just go,
Little
ooh, that.
tweak, a little tweak. No, I did it on purpose because my point was that I'm a Canadian woman in the 21st century writing music for texts that are from 1,000 years ago. So it started off as a doctoral piece in Sheffield. I went to University of Sheffield for 2 years to do doctorate, and then I left when my mother got sick. But they wanted me to write something new.
Oh, I remember that from your program notes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I just went, okay, this is enough now. I have to look after my mother. And so what I did was I integrated centuries of music into these pieces. And that's what made it such an interesting project for me. It's not like it's not your mother's liturgy, okay?
That was good. No,
It's my
absolutely not.
it's
Very,
my it's
it,
mine.
it's very contemporary, if you will,
Yes.
yet, of
Yes.
course, excruciatingly tuneful and gorgeous and glorious. But, in
Yeah.
other words, it's 20th
Yeah.
century English choral music, if
Oh,
you will,
yeah.
forgive me,
Yeah.
as
I mean,
opposed to ninth century liturgical monodic
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. And where else were we? Have we pretty much covered everything? Well, what do
Mhm.
you think? Are we pretty well done before I do the end? Anything coming up? Anything on your mind?
Well, I don't know. Like I said a little while ago, I'm waiting on the universe to show me what my next project is. I'm just finishing now. I'm doing still some PR for transmutation. Um, I'm just finishing updating the scores, which will be available, wow, in about a month or so. So if people want scores, they can write to me or they can write to Parma and these can be obtained. And then I don't know. I have Carnegie Hall in the fall with Ovidiu and Noreen. And I don't know what the next thing is. I kind of would like to do something. My sense of it is I'd like to do something a la Carl Jenkins in the sense of some sort of a, not exact, maybe song cycle, but with orchestra and different ensembles
Ooh, sounds good.
having to do with humanity needing to stay human in spite of the hate that seems to be infiltrating the world. So that at the moment is kind of it's simmering in my brain. But I don't push these things. I wait on them.
Hey, you worked for 40 years where you had to go to work and then go home. You know what I mean? All that, the 9 to 5, the work ethic, all that stuff, forget it. Now you're retired, I presume,
Yeah.
and you can allow things to just fester until they're ready to pop and then go ahead and have fun with it. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
So
Okay. Yeah. Well, so all of this we're going to put up. I think you've got some videos. I don't know. I'll chase you for pictures and all the rest of it, and probably the entire album maybe is somewhat available. Some of it,
thank you.
as I recall. All of this
Thank
up at Performing Arts Review, the page that you'll have for Transmutation. Um, And, and as you know, I do this tiered. My alibi is tiered marketing, which is I'm lucky to get this up in a week or two, and then I'll circle back after I get some more up to really write up the review.
That's
But
okay.
to me,
Yeah.
this really was so refreshing,
Oh, thanks.
really refreshing. Because as
That's
you know, last time I talked to you was circa about 2018 and your very first CD, and um, there's nothing extraordinary really in this CD. There's just home and heart and hearth and tradition and culture and Ukraine and all the rest of the important things that make us all human. That's what's there on the CD. So
Thank
I
you.
congratulate you. I think it's just a you are home. So sit back and let the next gorgeous project pop into your your brain at will.
Thanks.
You've got a winter to sit through, so
Yep,
that's
yep. It's cold, so I mean, it's kind of forming, but it's wafting in the ethers, and I'm gonna just let it settle,
That's right.
Yeah,
Absolutely right.
it'll
Exactly
settle
right.
when
You
it's
can't push
ready.
any of that stuff, and you don't need to. That's the beauty of it. Okay, I've had a great chat with
Thank you.
Canadian Ukrainian composer Joanna Estelle about your second CD, the 2023 Navona Records release, Transmutation. It's uh, it's really a wonderful, wonderful CD. Very, very, very satisfying
Thank you.
for the heart and the soul and all the rest of it. And that's really important, as you mentioned, and as we all know in these. Unfortunately, it looks like things are getting worse for a while yet. Times that we're in. So,
Yeah. Okay, Dan.
many
Thank you so
thanks,
much.
Joanna. Many thanks. See you.
Bye. Yeah. Bye bye.